So, I'll be explaining how architecture relates to Roman burial and funerary practices, and furthermore, look at how this reflects social values, religious beliefs, and identity in Rome in terms of social class and whatnot. So, specifically, we're going to look at four architectural locations and see how they relate back to all these other points my group members are trying to make. So let's get straight to it. So first we have the tomb of Cecilia Matea that was originally a finely constructed building, but now is almost barely intact, but still gives a sense of power and in its very dynamic forms. And as we can see in the photo, it's a cylindrical structure with a side of the building that is really hard to make out, but we can also see it almost has a castle like feeling to it. And this dates back all the way to the 1st century BCE, and it sits on a square base that asserts prestige and stability, located along one of Rome's most famous major roads. And this tomb signifies their position in society because they were able to ensure their family legacy by being able to build it along this road and marking it as a symbol of architectural symbol for power and stability. So we will be looking at next the tomb of Euryses the Baker, being one of the largest and best preserved funerary structures, monuments, whatever we feel like calling it. And this was built around 50 to 20 BCE. And if we look at the pictures, we can see very simple, basic early Roman architectural shapes and design. But the specific burial place just has no superstructure. But below that, we can see reliefs of bread production to kind of celebrate the profession of the person being buried here, Euryses, a baker. And if we look further, this small-scale architectural piece symbolizes his social mobility, his desire to want to memorialize his personal achievement. We can also see further how the working class engaged in funerary practices, burial practices, or even through their identity and status can also be shown. And furthermore, we can see how the architecture surrounding it also gives a sense of worker and empire relationship in terms of scale and structures of each other. So next, we'll look at the combs of Domitia. And you can see on this first picture right here, this is actually a little bit underground since these are catacombs. And these date back to the 2nd to 5th centuries Common Era, and it reflects a very major shift in funerary custom because now this place is almost like a cemetery and located underground, and it's adorned with Christian imagery. We can see all these fascinating paintings right here, the details, and it's not just this but various others showing now an interest in Christian imagery. And it's a reinterpretation of Roman funerary spaces, and you could all the iconography really is just about spiritual beliefs, and how you can see in this picture right here, this is more above ground, but more of like the apse of what we were talking about in class. And this is all connected back to architecture and how this works as a place to rest, basically. Next, we will be looking at the temple tombs of Kanos in southwest Turkey. And for context, they were under rule during 400 BCE when these were being constructed. Now, if we look at the photos, we can see these grand architectural marvels that are no less symbolizing struggle, wealth, and power. literally carved into the mountain. And this just makes it like immortalizing themselves into the nature, symbolizing their influence above all the people who helped make this, and could also be symbolizing, or not really symbolizing, but they blend the local Turkish culture per se with Roman influence into this amazing work of a feat of engineering, one could say. And this architectural shapes and forms become harmonious and become associated with funeral and burial practices and culture, while showing the gap in social class.
The Romans expressed art in their funerary practice in several rich and symbolic ways. Their approach to funerary art was deeply tied to their beliefs about death, the afterlife, family lineage, and social status. Roman funerary art was not just about mourning, it was about memory, identity, and legacy. Through sculpture, reliefs, inscription, and portraiture, they ensured the deceased were honored and remembered across generations. And that opened our eyes to the powerful reflection of cultural synthesis between Roman and Egyptian traditions. Their beauty and depth is not only in their craftsmanship, but also in their profound symbolic and spiritual purposes. The influence can be clearly seen in many artworks, including Without Limitation, the funerary portraits and mosaic used in Roman funerary practice, particularly those from Roman Egypt. For this research, I have chosen Tomb of the Hetiri as a great example of how the Romans practiced their funerary tradition through art, because it vividly illustrates several key elements of Roman attitudes towards death, commemoration, and social identity. I would love to focus on few things here. First, the elaborate reliefs and decoration. The tomb is renowned for its detailed sculptural reliefs, which show funerary rituals, monuments, and scenes of construction. These images serve as both celebration of the deceased's life and demonstration of the family's wealth, status, and accomplishments. For example, some reliefs show architectural works possibly commissioned or built by the Hattiri family, possibly connected to construction or engineering, which promotes their professional pride and legacy. The second thing I love to focus on here is the commemoration of the deceased's identity. The tomb likely belonged to a freed woman named Hateria, and the elaborate display reflects how even former slave, once freed and successful, could participate in the elite Roman funerary traditions. It demonstrates how funerary monuments were used to construct and display social identity, especially in the competitive atmosphere of the Roman society. Third, public display of status and piety. The monument was not just a private grave, but a public statement, visible to passerby, meant to immortalize the deceased and their family. Reflects Roman values of pietas, duty to family and gods, and preserving memory. Reflects Roman values of pietas, duty to family and gods, and preserving memory. Fourth, funerary rituals depicted in art. Reliefs show scenes of mourning, processions, and ritual, offering insight into how Romans honored the dead. This makes the tomb a valuable source for understanding actual funerary practice, not just beliefs. Fifth, the blend of personal and cultural symbols. The tomb mixes personal achievements with more traditional Roman symbols of death, like the funus imagery, bustes, or references to the underworld, which reveals how Romans balanced individuality and cultural norms in their commemorations.